This is Agronomy Moment. I'm Wendell Cohen. Today's podcast takes place with a web meeting with a Beck's employee. Enjoy. So, just to start out here on our podcast here, we have a special guest with us here today, Miss Janelle Winger from Beck's out in Indiana. She is the Seed Enhancements Lead, and she's been working in that job since January of 2009. Now, her background just a little bit is she grew up on a family farm in Western Ohio, right there on the Indiana-Ohio state line near Union City, Ohio. Her upbringing there with the background, she worked with 4-H and FFA and ultimately led her to pursue a undergrad in agriculture from Wilmington College in Southwest Ohio. In 2015, she graduated and moved to Wooster, Ohio to work at the Ohio State University's Research and Development Center in the soybean pathology lab under Dr. Ann Dorrance. There she spent 4 summers in Dr. Dorrance's lab running the seed treatment and foliar fungicide field trials while working on a master's degree part-time. After graduating with a master's in plant health management in December of 2019, she started for Beck's with the role of that Seed Enhancements Lead in January of 19. And as personal life goes, she is engaged and getting married in June. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's exciting. So, wanted to dive just a little bit more into your roles and responsibilities there at Beck's and what you actually cover, and just give us a little bit of an insight into your day.
Yeah, so on the day-to-day, I'm handling forecasting, ordering, and inventory management when it comes to our various seed treatment packages. So all of our packages, while we have one name, Escalate, for it, it's a lot of different components. And so getting components to all the sites that are treating and conditioning, that's probably my number one responsibility this time of year, starting from about September to mid-May to June. That's kind of the day-to-day. Along with that comes a fair amount of paperwork. So invoicing, making sure that plants receive product. And so that's some of the not so fun side of things, right? When you think of, it'd be fun to be the one picking what's going on the seed. And then I get to do a lot of, stuff like this, education and outreach. So I work a lot with marketing, David Frederick in marketing, to do come up with materials for our dealers and our sales force that are based off of seed treatment. Gotcha.
And so what does that look like on other times of the year? Is there times where you're out in the field, like walking like these different I'm imagining anyways, there are these different seed trials that you have and you're watching the response of plants, or are you mostly just in a lab with chemistries and things?
No, we actually don't necessarily have a lab here for seed treatment specifically. So I guess just to go through a full year. So let's say right after harvest, from harvest through planting, my main responsibilities are just getting treatment where it needs to be, buying treatment and keeping up with the supply. And then come May and June, I am out in the fields. So we do run some seed treatment trials internally. And so I just actually finished up treating those, and I've handed those off to research, our research group here at Beck's, and they will be planting those accordingly. And then I kind of follow their lead on when I should head out and start scouting early on in the season.
Sure. And so like, even far as like out here in Missouri, I noticed there was a time I was walking with a product specialist in a choice trial, and he made a comment that area over there, that's seed treatment trial. Is that something you've been involved with and would look at that data, or?
Right. Yep. So I'm the one, myself and Jim Herr are kind of head that up along with Scott Beck too. It's been a way they've been doing internal seed treatment trials probably for the last 15, 20 years. It's a way for us to hear about new products from different companies. We'll talk to anyone from like somebody working with something in their garage to some of the major chemical companies, BASF, Corteva. And then how we do that is through our, like you said, you were walking choice trials and you saw them. So we partner with research here at Beck's, and I treat all the seed, normally small batch treaters for instance, this year I treated 11 pounds of soybeans.
Okay.
So,
Yep.
and we have 24 different treatments that we're looking at. And same on corn, 24 different treatments on corn, and they're scattered throughout the Midwest at multiple different locations.
Sure. Okay, that's interesting. Now, can you tell us a little bit on why is Beck's called Escalate? Why not just make a unique name for each individual mix that comes down the pipeline?
Yeah, so like I said, or you mentioned in the intro, I've been here since 2019. So I had to dig into the history myself a little bit. I asked my boss, Jim, this morning, I said,
Yep.
I know that we got Escalate in 2009, and that's when they started rolling out that in marketing. Yes. And before that, he went into, we had Sure Grow on our soybeans and we had Fast Start on our corn. And it was a leadership decision to just make it an all-in-one, all-encompassing umbrella brand under the Escalate brand.
Okay.
And I'm not sure who picked the name or anything like that.
Yep.
But somehow, and we've been running with Escalate since 2009.
Perfect. On the seed treatments page of the Beck's website, it makes a comment that insect, nematode, disease protection, as well as improved stands and also create higher yields. What's your thought from your vantage point in research and what you've observed when you have the ability to look at control versus testing and different things? What's your take on that?
I think that a lot of times we don't know what we're going to face that season. Yes. And so from my time at Ohio State and growing up in Ohio, being around farming, each spring is different.
Yes.
And so I would say that those higher yields and improved stand come in situations where seed treatment's really kicking in and helping. And those are situations, cool, wet conditions, heavier rains, insect pressure. And so, yes, I do believe that we're getting improved yields from having seed treatment on.
Perfect. Now, you talked about the cold, wet conditions, and that was a question I also had. And I want to just dive right into that since it was mentioned. In Southwest Missouri, we can have cold, wet Aprils. We can have, really baking heat following a night rain in June when we're planting. What's your thoughts on seed treatments, their offer protection, and what does it help the most? Is it the cold, wet conditions? Is it the hot and wet, or what's your thoughts?
So I think most people would say probably cool and wet, but I'll dive into warm and wet too. So cool and wet, because that's when you're getting those, cool and wet, your plant is not happy. It's stressed to begin with. And then add in one of the key pathogens, Pythium. It loves temperatures right around that 55 degrees. And so that's when a lot of the spores are germinating. And so when you have saturated soils, cool temperatures, you're getting the most sporulation out there, which means infection to come in the next few hours to the next day or so. And so I think that's why a lot of times we would say cool and wet is the worst, but let's not also forget that there's things that also like the warm, wet conditions. So Phytophthora, for instance, on soybeans, it likes a little bit warmer conditions than what Pythium does. And it's the same deal with that as they're both water molds. So I guess the point is, if you have wet soils, you're probably going to have issues, and you'll see an improvement from seed treatments. Now, if you have excessive rainfalls, if you have flooding, unfortunately, seed treatments are not going to save you from that. If they could, I'd probably be on a beach somewhere, right? If I could figure that out. So as far as, because anytime that there's moisture, excessive moisture, your plant is already stressed out. Okay, those roots can't breathe. And some of those key pathogens, that's how they thrive. That's when they thrive. So anytime that there's excessive moisture, that's when you're going to see the seed treatments really help out.
And that would be like even in like specifically in like your fungicides and things like that. And then also the Alivo or your SDS Plus treatments can help with the later infections.
On corn, we have 6 different fungicides. And the reason behind that is, so I mentioned Pythium. What we don't always dive into is that Pythium, while that's kind of like the word everyone knows, what we don't realize is that there's about 14 to 15 species of Pythium that are out there and active.
I see.
So whereas we have a couple different products that of those 6 fungicides that hit Pythium, so whereas mefenoxam may hit a few species, Intego Solo comes in and cleans up the rest. And so we really, when you're at the university and these chemical companies are really more interested in species specific activity instead of just, this hits Pythium.
Yes, that's interesting. I didn't realize that.
Yep.
So you talked about some of the different ingredients here in going into corn and soybean treatment. What are considerations that you do give on what ingredients go on seed treatment?
Right. So we're looking probably first and foremost is, how does it perform agronomically? So do we have an issue with this, and is it something that's going to help the majority of our customers here at Beck? So, does it fix it or does it help us out? And so first off, probably agronomic performance, availability. So because of the way that we treat here at Beck's, we're treating 100% of our corn and we have one treatment. So
Yes.
we have to, it's a talk with the suppliers. We have to make sure that we have enough to cover everything, right?
Sure.
And so then it comes down to, are we able to apply it to the corn? So part of my job is not only helping out Salesforce and understanding the treatments and making sure that the chemistries really help agronomically, but it's getting the treatment on the seed, which sometimes is the trickiest part. And so if we have a treatment that is agronomically sound and it's available, but it's really hard to apply, probably not going to go that route, or
Sure.
work with the supplier to see if we can get around that. But really, application ease means something to us, right? Because
Sure.
or if not, you break down efficiencies and that kind of stuff. Something we don't often think about in this role, but and then it comes down to cost too. But I would say that agronomics, availability, and its application status definitely outweigh the cost here.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure. And then far as talking just a little bit about why not just throw everything on there that's available then. So far as I know you mentioned cost, but there's other things too, right? Or what far as chemistry load on the bean or the seed?
Yeah. So you mentioned it. There's like a load that the bean can handle or that corn can handle. And then you can't just throw everything in the kitchen sink at it. There's only so much space on that seed. And really Beck's has kind of been pushing the limits on that the last few years, mainly because we've been able to make it work.
Yes.
And we've been able to work with different polymer and colorant companies to minimize those amounts to maximize our active ingredient amounts.
Sure.
So that we can, pack on as much as we can. But as far as like, if you could put everything on there, one, I think you lose efficiencies on drying time because I don't know if those beans and corn would ever dry. And so it becomes an application side, at that point we would say, okay, that's too much. And there might be some duplication in products.
And far as, is that one thing that SDS Plus, when it was launched, helped out with is it did two things, right? Some of the ingredients were able to fight against two different type of diseases or.
Yeah, so the nice thing about SDS Plus is that it's kind of working as a systems approach. And so while we're getting some help on sudden death syndrome, we've got a couple different products in there that are helping with sudden death syndrome. So we've got a hard chemistry, and then we've got a biofungicide that's also helping. If you know anything about SDS, sudden death syndrome, you know that nematodes play a role in that too.
Yes.
By the feeding and weakening the plant. And so our SDS Plus also has Nemasect in there, which is a nematicide that really helps kind of round out that systems approach for SDS Plus.
I see. Now I have my last question here we talked about is, what does the future look like in seed treatments? New products, things coming up on the horizon.
That's probably the coolest thing about my job is that I get to stay at the forefront of what's coming out. One, either testing them in those internal trials that I mentioned, or two just hearing and seeing data from different companies. It's a cool seat to be in because, like I said, we get to see the pipeline of a lot of companies. So I would say what I'm seeing for the next few years, without revealing too much, is that there's a couple cool new Pythium products coming out. Syngenta has one that's coming out called Viantis. We have been looking at that, and we'll be looking at that. There's a few biological strains that we're looking at. It seems like the biological world has just exploded.
Well, I was just going to follow that up with a question: is there anything in the biological world? So
yeah, and I can start to see there's more and more emphasis on biologicals and helping out with pathogens as well as insects. And so it'll be interesting to see how that turns out in the next 3 to 5 years, and see where that goes. And if any of them, align with what we're doing, it'll probably be something that we bring on.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would have that in our conversation that has come up, or in thoughts that you have as a follow-up to this interview?
I think it's good. One of the things is that seed treatment's a big industry. And so there's a lot of different products and there's a lot going on. And so it's one of those things that you really have to know, take a look in your field, what you're dealing with. If you have questions, reach out. I would tell customers, reach out to their dealers, their seed advisors, their agronomists, and really get down to the bottom of it, because a lot of times, whether it be seed treatment or something else, there's something that somebody can tell you. And so that's why I appreciate being able to do these things, kind of get the message out and spread the word about what Beck's has to offer when it comes to seed treatment.
Sure. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to do that. It's been very informative. And I remember that time, I think it was at the Effingham Field Show in 2019, we sat across at lunch, and I really enjoyed it. And you've covered some of those topics we talked about that day. And like you said, getting that message out and making sure that everybody understands what we're facing out here and what those seed treatments are actually doing for us.
Yeah.
So with that being said, thank you very much for joining us today, Janelle.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is Agronomy Moment. Hey, this is Wendell Cohen, show host and producer. If you need help with your operation, go to topagservices.com/signups to receive alerts. Thank you to all those who made this show possible. This show is over. See ya.